Hi, welcome back to my series on using pivot tables to make a better gradebook. This week, we're going to talk about how you can move away from a 0-1 binary system where you have zeros for incomplete or solutions that need to be reattempted and 1 for a passed objective. A very common system in the mastery grading world is EMRN, which is E usually means exceeds expectations, M means mastered, R means needs revision, and N means not accessible, though those definitions change from practitioner to practitioner. In recording these values in your gradebook, because you could just take your score and do EMRN, but you're going to run into a problem in your gradebook when you try to add up, like what is E plus M plus R? That's not exactly something that Excel is going to know how to do, so you're going to have to be a little bit clever in how you manage this. So what I'm going to do is I want to make a system where you can input EMRN, and in the score, I want it to display a tuple, like we'll say 2100 would mean 2 E's, 1 M, and 0 R and N. If I saw like 1, 2, 1, 1, I would know, okay, well that's 1 E, 2 M's, 1 R, 1 N. So this is the tuple that we're going to have in our gradebook, which means we need to code these values cleverly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn each of my E values into 1000, my M values into 100, my R values into 10, and my N values into 1. Now this is going to work as long as a student doesn't have more than 9 of any one of these values, which I think in almost any grading system I've seen would be kind of a ridiculous situation if a student had 10 N's on a single objective. But just be aware that that could be a problem here. If you were concerned about that possibility, just double the number of zeros and make an N worth 1, an R worth 100, an M worth 10,000, and an E worth I guess 1 million. It'd be a little bit harder to read, but it would avoid that possibility. Since I don't think that's going to happen, we're going to go with this coding. Now, one thing you could do is you could just manually input 1000 for every E, 100 for every M, 110 for every R, and 1 for every N. But we want Excel to do the heavy lifting. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a function that will say if a particular cell equals E, then the output is 1000. Actually, I'll kind of do it in pseudocode. If value equals cell, we'll say the code will be 1000. Else, if value, oops, I should not say cell, I should have said E. If the value is M, then you want the code value to be 100. Else, if the value is R, you want the code value to be 10. And else, if the value equals N, you want the code value to be 1, and then maybe one final else, which is just to say code equals 0, and maybe you could highlight those cases to say something went wrong. So we want to put all of this information into an if statement for Excel to understand. It's going to look kind of nasty, which is why I'm going to type it out in Notepad first, and then put that formula into Excel. Be able to do it once, and then it'll be set up for your entire gradebook. Rather than doing this all at once, let's try to get it just working incrementally. The first thing we're going to say is if the score, I'll just say score here, and we'll figure out what cell that is later. If score equals quote E, that's how it knows I'm looking for the actual letter E and not the variable E. If score equals E, I want to print 1000. Otherwise, I'm going to print 0. Let's just see what happens if I copy this over to Excel. Copy, and in here let's paste it. And the one thing we need to do is we need to fill in the score. So let's delete that and click on the score box. Okay, so its notation is square bracket @ column label, and then closing bracket. And all of these now are going to be 0, but if I were to change this 1 to an E, it would be 1,000. If I change this one to an E, that's another 1,000. So we are making progress. Now what we want to do is, instead of having a 0 here, we want to do the next possible case. This would be, bringing this back, would be if at score equals M, we want 100, otherwise print 0. And we're going to place that, right where that 0 is, because if it's not an E, we want to run this second test. This is our nested if statement. And of course, thankfully, all these values are updated accordingly. Now if I put this as an M, aha, it's 100. And I can make that one 100 as well. The next one would be if, actually I could just copy and paste this. Copy, paste. If the score is in R, make it a 10. And if it's an N, make it a 1. So I'm going to copy and paste this into, again, that last 0. Instead of always make it a 0, I want to turn it into a 10 if it's an R. And lastly, we're going to turn that final 0 likewise. Okay, so this is kind of messy. Let me see if I can clean it up here so it's a little bit bigger. I'm saying if the score is an E, make it 1,000. This last part is the else, like what to do if it's not an E. Well, if it's not an E, I want it to do the check to see if it's an M, in which case if it's an M, make it 100. And if it's not 100, don't make it a 0, make it a 10 if it's an R. And if it's not an E, an M, or an R, I want it to put in a 1 for an N. If it's none of those, then I can put in a 0. And so this is really what we have. And I need some closing parentheses, because I have, looks like 1, 2, 3, 4 open parentheses, and 1, 2, 3, 4 closing parentheses. And this is the function that you would use to turn the EMRN system into these 4-digit codes that correspond to the number of E's, number of M's, number of R's, and number of N's. So let's go ahead and hit enter with that. We'll say this is an R, and I'll just play around with some values. E, M, R, E, N, 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 R, R, E, M, and then we'll do N. I guess down here we could do R and M. And I'm going to call this column score code. And I'm going to do refresh on all the data. Now when we go over to our actual gradebook spreadsheet, things are not going to be good, because it's still going to be trying to sum up the score column. So when I go over to gradebook, I think it's just adding letters. And so yeah, everything gets a pass because any letter is counted as a 1. So what we want to do is, instead of, oh wait, we just lost, we have the temps down here, we don't have anything else. So what I need to do is, in my ledger, I need to find the score code and put it down here. Sum of score code, and now you can indeed see, let me rearrange the values. Okay, now we have those tuples, and you can read these off. You would not show these to students. I'll have to do another video on how you can translate these back to student information in the mail merge, but you can read off, so this student, Blue, on the addition objective has 1 E and 1 R. On the subtract standard, the student has 1 R. On the multiply standard, 1 M and 1 N. You use the grading system, but you can read these off to say exactly how many times. And maybe nice to have some leading zeros. I don't know how to do that at this point, but it's pretty easy to just read off what these are. So here we have a case where yellow has a 2. So this would be 1 M and 2 R's. And then all the other information has stayed the same. When you're looking at the total, you very likely are going to have a case where the total number of e's may exceed 9, and the total number of n's may exceed 9. In that case, this last column is not going to be helpful. I'm going to close by saying that there are other grading systems besides EMRN. Some practitioners may choose to have just a 3-tier system like mastered, progressing, and not accessible yet, and have their own letter systems corresponding to those. So this system that I've presented here is fairly robust. You can change it to be any number of tiers that you want, but the main idea here is you are now getting away from having a point-based system. You just enter the letter corresponding to the code that it represents for their work, and Excel is going to take care of converting it into something that it can add or it can add up or count as necessary. All right, that's it for this video. Next time we're going to be looking at how to take this information and make better reports out of it.